Thank you for joining us on the Winning and Selling podcast. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are 13,183,250 people listing their job title as sales or selling. They have a mean annual wage of $50,370, and that is really mean. And if you're in the 90th percentile, the average wage is $94,040. That tells us that there are a lot of sales reps out there who are basically starving to death because they don't know how to differentiate themselves from the pack. So if you want to move into that top 10%, listen up as Scott and I welcome our guest, sales leadership expert, Steve Keating, to tell us how to move from sales rep to trusted advisor on episode 584 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Wow, it sounds like a great conversation with Steve. We're so grateful to have him back with us. I think, is this the third time he's been with us, Bill?
Three-peat, our first three-peat.
Three-peater, so good.
Yeah.
And every time it's a new topic, so it just kind of shows the range and the scale that Steve brings every time we have him on the show.
Well, he tells me he knows everything.
He does. He reminds you that he knows everything too.
I'm always fascinated to listen to him because he really actually knows a lot about selling. So are we going to have a book club today, Scott?
No book club today. So we are doing the book Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. Next week, we're going to be covering chapter 3. So if you broke chapter 2 down into 2 halves, you should be ready to cover chapter 3, which is a
little shorter this time.
It is shorter, but it's very impactful. It's a very highly concentrated chapter, and it's going to have a lot of the foundation of what we're going to be talking about going forward. So pick up the book, Spin Selling by Neil Rackham.
All right. Well, we want to have all the time for Steve today. So Steve and I met almost 30 years ago, maybe more, Steve, at Dale Carnegie training. We worked together there. Then we went our separate ways. Steve went over to Toro to work with them for a long time, and I went independent. But Steve has over 30 years of sales and sales management experience, 8.5 with Dale Carnegie, as he mentions. He's been selling, writing, presenting, training in sales, customer service, public speaking, managing people, developing leadership skills, and managing a business. And so as Scott says, his background is varied. He's recognized as a thought leader and an authority on leadership. He's highly acclaimed, demand as a presenter. He speaks dozens of times a year on topics related to leadership, customer service, business management, and sales growth. He's certified by the Sales and Marketing Executives International as a certified professional salesperson, certified sales executive, and certified marketing executive. So when you say he's certifiable, that is absolutely true. So he's got a Lead Today. His Lead Today personal blog has over 1 million subscribers and can be found at stevekeating.me, and we'll also include that in the show notes. Steve, welcome back to the show. Great to have you.
Good to have you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Scott. I want to clear up one thing immediately. This rumor that I know everything, clearly, I do not know everything because I don't even know enough to stay off of this show. So, but I'm learning.
Well, when you ask Steve, he says he knows a lot. When you ask his dear wife, Vicky, she wonders.
Yeah.
There is that. That's true.
That's right. Well, we are going to talk about how to move to a trusted business advisor. So let's start off with the basics, Steve. What do you mean by trusted business advisor, and how's that different from a sales rep?
So I think the key difference is one is highly transactional. A sales rep, and you know, I hear a lot of salespeople say, "Well, I have a great relationship with my customers," and I'll use my experience from the Toro Company when our guys would sell to a golf course superintendent, and then they'd want to go see the general manager of the golf course. And the golf course superintendent would say, no, you can't go see the general manager. I don't want you talking to the general manager. I'm your contact. You talk to me. And when I would ask the sales rep, well, why does the superintendent say that? They finally come to the realization, well, I guess they just don't trust me in what I might say to the general manager. And I said, but you told me you had a great relationship with this superintendent. Well, I do. Our relationship is wonderful. And it's like, well, but here's the reality. all true relationships are based upon a foundation of trust. Absent trust, there can be no true relationship. So if that superintendent doesn't trust you to talk to somebody else in their organization without them being present, I question the level of trust, and therefore I question the level of relationship. Now, if you move from being a sales rep into a trusted business advisor role, then that customer of yours honestly doesn't make a move, won't talk to the competitors, won't make a decision to change a product without your advice first. You literally become a part of their organization, an integral part of their organization. And Bill, I don't know if you remember a guy named Jack Pates, but Jack Pates worked with us at Dale Carnegie. He was a avocational instructor of the sales course, and Jack owned a commercial heating and air conditioning company. And Jack didn't brag about this, and I found out about it kind of through happenstance playing golf with him one day. But Jack was in business for 25 years, and he never lost a customer.
Wow.
Once he earned that customer's business, that customer never did business with anyone else. And when one of his customers was going to expand their building or add on, one of the first people they called was Jack to say, what contractor should I be talking to? And what, what cement guy should I be talking to? He was an integral part of their business, and they sought his advice out on every aspect of their company, not just the product that he sold. And it was impossible. It became impossible for competitors to dislodge him from an account. And that's the hugest difference between just being a sales rep, where you're fighting for every sale, where you have to reprove the value of yourself and your product every time an opportunity comes up, or being a trusted business advisor, where it's just a given that you're going to be in the driver's seat.
Now, you also use the word transactional, and I think I have an idea what that means. What is it that causes us as salespeople to be transactional, or what's the opposite of transactional?
So the opposite to me of transactional is partnering. And as a transactional rep, we go in, we discover an opportunity, and this is really the legacy sales approach. It's a sales process that I taught for years, but we find an opportunity, we go in and we ask a few questions of the customer to try to find a way that our product might fit in their organization or might solve a problem in their organization. And once we find that gap, if you will, that in their need, we fill it with our product. We get them to say yes to our product. We sell them the product. They pay for the product, and we move on to the next potential customer. And we
hand them over, and we hand that customer over to delivery of some kind.
Delivery of some kind, maybe our customer service team.
Right.
And in many cases, too many cases, these are the guys that average to $50,000 a year, frankly. The next time they talk to that customer is when there's another opportunity for a sale. That's transactional.
Earlier, you talked, Steve, about the superintendent talking to the general manager of a golf course. I think that's a great technique. I think that really works on decommoditizing your product or service when you end up going higher up in an organization. That's not something that's done often enough. How does a salesperson do that? If they recognize that they've got trust with the superintendent and they recognize that they need to go higher up in the organization and meet the general manager, what are some of the techniques, the scripts, the words that a salesperson would use talking to their customer to get higher up within an organization?
That's a great question, Scott. So I often ask salespeople about their motivations for being in sales. Why are you in sales? What are you doing for your customers? And a lot of them will give me some variation of, well, I want to help my customers achieve their goals and objectives, something along those lines. And it's like, that's fantastic. Very noble. I love people who sell for a nobler purpose than just making money. Those are the people, by the way, making over the $90,000, the ones that have a nobler purpose. But so then I'll ask them the obvious question. So what are some of the common goals and objectives of your customers? Rickets.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, help me understand this, because I'm a simple-minded guy. How is it you're going to help them achieve their goals and objectives when you have no clue what they are?
Right.
And the discussion ends up going around, well, I'm selling widgets. It just seems kind of corny to me that I would talk to a guy about their objectives and their goals and their business goals and their personal goals. And it's like, you know what? I will tell you that when we role play this in training classes, when we focus group customers, that's a hang up of the salesperson. It seems corny to the salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
To the customer, it seems like they're talking to somebody who gives a damn, somebody who cares. And that's the fastest way to increase that level of trust, is to really take it beyond your product. If I'll tell you, if all you have to sell and all you bring to the table is your product, then you're forcing yourself to stay in that transactional mode where you're going to compete with other people against their product, against their pricing. When we demonstrate that we actually have the best interests, the long-term interests of that customer in mind, it builds trust and will allow us to get deeper into the organization than a mere transactional salesperson ever could. So I'll give you one quick example.
Yeah.
When Bill and I were at Carnegie, I got a lead for a company up in Fridley, Minnesota, and I called the guy. We met, and he had a lot of people working for him that English was not their first language. They struggled with English, and he wanted to enroll them in the Dale Carnegie course in effective speaking and human relations so they could learn better English. And I had been aware of a course that was working, a company that was working with organizations who needed help teaching people English for, if they hired immigrants or whatever.
Right, the ESL
and I
programs.
Said,
yep.
Yeah, and I said, you know what? I'd love to sell you this Dale Carnegie course. I think it would do your people a lot of good, but it is not going to achieve the prime objective that you've just explained to me. You really want to be talking to this company.
Mm-hmm.
And he was almost shocked. He said, so you're going to turn the business down? And I said, I'm looking more long term. I'd love to have a relationship with your organization, but what I have is not going to be have the largest impact on your organization. So call these guys. That person became the greatest source of referrals I ever had in my whole time at Carnegie. He literally went out and looked for business for me and told them to call me because I had their long-term interest in mind. And I will admit, I swallowed hard when I said, don't buy my stuff, buy somebody else's stuff. But in the long run, it pays great dividends.
So sitting down as you open your order book and saying, how you doing? I notice you're a fisherman, isn't really building that trust. It's just a greeting.
No, and saying have a donut doesn't really get it done either.
Yeah, right.
I'm bringing pizza next week.
Right, yeah. right.
Well, let's talk about what you've gone into some of these in specifics, like your trusted advisor story about the gentleman in Fridley. But what actions then, if you could make a list of 5 or 6 things that salespeople should do to build this trust as they change their mindset from this transactional salesperson to somebody who's really going to build a relationship?
So I'm going to talk about something that's a little bit of a foreign concept, especially to those folks who are making $50,000 or less in sales. This is a concept called planning the sales call. So we're actually prepared to demonstrate why we should be trustworthy. I talk a fair amount about trust, and I have people tell me, I just had this conversation with a general manager of a business a couple of weeks ago. And he lost a couple of key people, and he goes, I don't understand why they left. I've never done anything to cause them not to trust me. And I said, well, that's great. I'm sure that's probably true. So let me ask you, as a leader in your organization, what did you do to demonstrate that you were trustworthy? What did you do proactively to show that you're trustworthy, that you're not just a run-of-the-mill boss? And he didn't have any answers. And if we want to really move from a sales representative to a trusted business advisor, part of our planning needs to be, what am I going to do on this call to demonstrate I'm more trustworthy than other people, that I bring more to the table than just a product that maybe they could even buy online. And what proactive steps are you going to take? And here's one example. If you've been in business for a while, it would be my hope that you would know something about your industry and about your business. And that should give you some insights into some of the challenges that your customers are facing. And can you go in, regardless of the product you're selling, can you go in and offer advice and solutions that you don't make any money on because it's not going to cost them anything? Can you give them that kind of advice and say, hey, I don't know if you ever thought of this, but I've seen other organizations in similar situations that have done this, this, and this. You might want to give some of that some thought and maybe actually give it a try. I think it could really benefit your organization. Can you bring that kind of advice? But to be able to do that, you have to plan that sales call, and you have to analyze who this customer is, some of your past conversations with them, to understand their situation as good as you can. The typical sales process says, I don't need to do that. I'm going to go in and I'm going to ask questions to find out what their problems are. And at that point, asking them questions so they can tell you what their problems are, that's not adding value to them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you add value to this call without your product? That's the real key to being a trusted business advisor. And most people just don't put a great deal of thought into one of my primary objectives for every call. I'm taking the valuable time of my customer. One of my primary objectives must be that no matter what else happens, I leave value behind.
Mm-hmm.
That there was value from my presence in this guy's business. What's that value going to be? And you have to have that plan going in, or most of the time it won't happen.
And so it sounds like you're saying that every appointment that you have with a client doesn't mean you're there searching around for something to sell them, but that you're offering them something, that you're bringing them an idea, that you're bringing them a concept that might be helpful to them.
Imagine the surprise of most customers when they find out that's what you're doing. That you're not just looking at them as a checkbook or a payday, but you're looking at them as a human being whom you can help through your experience and your experience with other people, that you can bring something to the table that might be of benefit to them, even if there's no benefit to you. There are not a lot of salespeople, frankly, that have raised their game to that level, because I hear it all the time from sales managers. Well, I need hunter gatherers. Well, you know what? I don't have any problem with that, but understand part of the hunting process is building relationships that don't involve necessarily a dollar transaction.
So there's a change of mentality from I got to go out and find me some money to I have to develop a relationship with these people where they trust me with everything.
Yep.
Time consuming.
It is time consuming, but I teach the concept, and I know you guys are very familiar with this, of customer lifetime value. And do I want to sell this person a product once and then fight like hell against all the competition for the second sale? Or do I want to earn this person's business one time, and then between the time there's another opportunity, continue to develop that relationship on an ongoing basis by adding value upon value upon value? So the next time they're in the market for the products I sell, I own the share of mind. The first person they're going to call is me, and it's very likely they're not going to call any of my competitors, because they know what they're going to get when they buy from me. And it's a whole lot more than just product.
So that value that we're trying to demonstrate to them, that isn't just the sale itself. There's all other kinds of value that we need to be demonstrating between the sales, so that when it comes time for an opportunity, we're the choice.
Yep, absolutely. So here's an example that I've used with a couple of guys I know in the car industry in the Twin Cities. And I've asked them about electric vehicles, and they said, well, we're not really selling those yet. So I don't know that much about it. And it's like, so electric vehicles are taking over your industry. They're going to have a huge impact on your career. And because you don't have a model for sale on your show floor right now, you don't need to know anything about them. No. And it's like, okay, so here's my take on that. You're not willing to invest in yourself so that you can help your customers make better decisions. What do you tell a guy that comes in, since you admittedly don't know anything about electric vehicles? What do you tell a guy that comes in and he's looking for a Chevy and he's thinking about a Tesla? How do you help him with that? Walk him through that decision, because you just told me you don't know anything about Tesla. So all you can do is talk about your Chevy. That doesn't help make a decision. That's not being an advisor to them.
It seems like you're really talking about what expectations a prospect has from a salesperson. And I remember the book Selling the Invisible by Harry Beckwith many years ago. He says that when you're selling a service, you're selling a promise. And the value of that service is only as good as the bearer of the promise. So the confidence and the credibility that the prospect has in the bearer of a promise is where the value is created. So you create the value and then you claim the value in the conversation. So, expectations are so important. That's one of the questions that I ask a prospect is, I'm kind of curious when we're working together, what are the expectations that you have of me? And I listen, and then I say, so you're not interested in this? And they go, well, I didn't say that. And they go, well, you didn't include it in the expectations. And then once you do that, then the prospect starts to uncover, go, wait a minute, maybe there's stuff that I don't know that this person can tell me that I might learn something from. And I find that the trust and the credibility goes up when you practice that step. And then also the criteria. I mean, understanding the criteria is understanding the expectations, which is understanding the goals and objectives. So I think once a salesperson uncovers the criteria, they control the agenda and they control the conversation, being influential and persuasive. Are there different ways in those areas that you can build trust? Or adding on to that, what are some of the things that are relevant in today's marketplace for salespeople to do that?
Well, it's interesting. I've seen a bunch of research, and it varies a little bit by demographic, but the expectations today of customers are that you won't be transactional, that you will bring more to the table, that you'll bring your expertise with you, and it is. I think the mere act, Scott, the mere act of asking questions like, what are some of your goals and objectives, and where do you see yourself in 3 years or 5 years, and what can I do to help you get there? Those are questions that most salespeople just won't ask, and the mere asking of those questions sets us apart. I trusted business advisors, and this is an interesting concept to me. Trusted business advisors are not afraid to ask a question that their prospects won't have an immediate answer to. I will tell you that if you're asking questions of your customers and they have answers just like that immediately off the top of their head, then you're not asking deep enough questions, thoughtful enough questions to be considered a trusted business advisor.
Oh, true.
It's okay to let there be a few moments of silence on a sales call. That's not the worst thing in the world. To give you've asked a thoughtful question. Now allow your customer the chance to answer it. And by the way, this is a mistake I've made about 10 million times. When you get those 4 or 5 seconds of silence, don't turn the question into a multiple choice for your customer. Don't say, well, could it be this, or this? Because they're going to pick one of them.
Right.
And your information is worthless at that point.
Wow, that's such great advice. Listening is probably the biggest challenge for salespeople, and and asking deep questions is another challenge for salespeople. And the ones that I've talked to, I say, why don't you ask those high gain questions that give you great information? And they go, well, I don't want to upset the prospect. I don't want to anger them. What do you say to those salespeople that have that mindset?
Get over it.
Get a new mindset.
Well, here's the thing. I in my years at Toro, I would ride with our salespeople, and we would go in to see a customer, and I would ask them a question, and I look over our sales rep, and he's got this horrified look on his face, like, I can't believe you asked that question, but the customer answered it. They would always answer it.
Yeah.
And we get out into the salesperson's truck and they say, I can't believe you asked that question. And it's like, we needed that piece of information in order to be able to help the customer. So I had to ask it. Well, you got away with it because you've got the bigger business card from Toro. I could never ask that question. And it's like, I will tell you, I will guarantee you, your customer would appreciate you asking that kind of question. You know, we all of our teachings around discovery have been, we ask questions to uncover the customer's problems. But sometimes our customers have problems they're not necessarily aware of, even because they don't know there's a solution. If there's no solution, I just going to live with it, right? So it's not really a problem. But by asking those deeper, thoughtful questions, we help customers become more aware of some situations that they have that they might not have even been aware of. And they're grateful for that. That builds trust.
Mm-hmm. And I would think that if you're afraid to ask your customer a question, perhaps you're not a trusted advisor.
Well, I would say
you're
also
afraid of losing that business because you ask a difficult question.
Yes, and in that case, what you need to do is figure out how to live on less than $50,000 a year.
Right.
Well, we're getting close to wrapping it up. Scott, do you have one more question? And then Steve, I want you to kind of give us maybe a 3-step wrap up.
I'm always curious when we have a guest, Steve, maybe I've asked this question before, but what book or author has had the greatest influence on you when it comes to your sales career, your sales philosophy, and leading salespeople?
Well, it's interesting. It's not a sales book per se, but it's a book that I read every year, every January, because I'm a very slow learner to begin with. Bill is intimately familiar with this book. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's an old book. I mean, it was first published in 1936, but despite all of the changes and all of the technology and AI coming into the game now, people are people, and people prefer to do business with those that they like and trust. It's always been that way, and history would indicate that it's always going to be that way. Even when we look at how Gen Z buys, for instance, they still, they have different expectations, if you will, but still they buy from people they like and trust.
Right.
And that's, to me, is a great book. I read it every year because I forget sometimes how important those relationships are. But I'm also into almost anything, and again, not sales books per se, but almost anything written by the great John Maxwell.
Yes.
As he causes us to look inside of ourselves to see what, so many salespeople, and you guys know this, but they want their company to change something. They want the industry to change something. They want better. They want to sell more. But what they don't want to do is they don't want to change themselves. They don't want to, other people. I love change when it affects other people. I don't really like it so much when it affects me. But Maxwell makes us look inside of ourselves to say, what do we need to do different to be better?
Yeah. So what's 2-3 quick steps then, Steve, that people could take to move toward trusted? What's my first thing I should do with my 5 best customers?
So, well, you know what? Here's a great question. So, for my 5 best customers, my first thing to do would be go in and say, hey, you know what? I want to move. I feel like we have a pretty good relationship, but I want to move to another level in this relationship. And I want to move to a level of trusted business advisor. And so what are some of your expectations from me? How do I elevate our relationship? What do I do to be more trusted in your organization? And not just by you, but in your organization. What are some things that I can do to separate myself from everybody else that comes in here for your benefit?
Wow. I think that's a great start. That is really a good first step that all of us can take. Well, Steve, thanks a lot for being on the podcast with us today. It's always a pleasure. You have great stories and so much wisdom. And now we're gonna have your Lead Today blog link on our website or on our show page. Anything else that you want to add for our customers or for our customers? Talk about customers. Anything else you want to add for our listeners?
You're kind of customers. Nope. You can also follow me on X. I've actually started in the last little while here a subscription part of that, where I post videos on life and leadership a couple times a week. You can subscribe to those if you wish to, and I'm pretty active on there. But you also, if you're going to follow me on X, you have to be willing to put up with my sense of humor as well.
Well, thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, this has been great. So, Scott, you want to wrap things up?
Yeah. Our golden nugget for today is no matter what people tell you, words and ideas can change the world. By Robin Williams. I miss him. Boy, I wish he was around today.
I always thought of that. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I think words hurt a lot more than really sticks and stones. So that's why we read How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Exactly.
Because what we say and how we treat people is going to be lasting. All this information, Steve's contact information, can be found at winningatselling.com. It'll be in the show notes. This is show 584.
So next week, again, Spin Selling, Neil Rackham, we're going to cover chapter 3, and the title is going to be Overcoming the Need for Social Approval, which might kind of piggyback on the topic today of being a trusted advisor. How can you break through some of the conceptual barriers of wanting to be liked by your prospects and getting that social approval? We're going to be talking about that with Bill and I are going to be talking about that.
Please subscribe, share the podcast with your colleagues on your social media. Go out and get better, one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.